Well, good afternoon, guys. I hope you guys are ready for our next topic, cybersecurity hacking, minds for good. Next up, we have someone who knows about how to get into your head. He's quite literally. His name is Josh Crumbaugh. He's the CEO and founder of Fisher Firewall, the AI platform that reduces risk by clicks, reduces risky clicks by 99%. In other words, he's the guy who makes sure that you don't click that link that says, click here for a free iPhone. As a former ethical hacker, Josh has legally broken to to Fortune 500 companies, banks, government systems, emphasis on legal. Today, he's turned his talent into helping others outsmart social engineering, blending behavioral science and machine learning to make a safer choice for the safer choices second nature. He's also the host for Fishing for Answers, Fishing for Answers podcast. Please help me welcome Josh Crumbaugh.
Thank you. All right, how is everyone today? Okay, so today we are going to talk about social engineering for good. Anyone here have experienced social engineering? Got any red teamers? Oh, we've got a few. All right. Well, I think you'll like this because I started out my career as an ethical hacker. Very quickly found out that degree that I thought I would never use in marketing was actually really handy when it came to social engineering. Turns out that going to school to learn out how to manipulate people would go to use at some point. But I really, throughout my career, I guess I had a breaking point where I had tailgated in off of the same person 4 years in a row. And I started questioning if what I was doing was providing any value. And what I realized was that when we would have repeat findings, they were always the human findings, the security awareness findings. Anyone else seen that? Yeah, I see a lot of hands, as many as said they were into social engineering. And so I really set out to ask the question, how do we use social engineering for good? During that process, I actually met a professor from Plymouth University over in the UK who was leading a project to write college coursework on exactly this, how we build effective security awareness training programs that not only meet compliance, but actually change human behavior. And I realized that, hey, social engineering for good is actually called behavioral science. We've been studying it for millennia. We just have to apply it to cybersecurity. And so that's what I'm going to talk today about, is how we can use those same tactics that are used against us every day to make our employees more secure. So really, awareness is not enough. I see so much emphasis put on awareness. And awareness is great, but let me ask you, how many people trust their staff not to click on a fish at 5 p.m. on a Friday afternoon when they're waiting in line at a grocery store checking their email? Does anyone trust them in that situation? I see no hands. No, because awareness requires that conscious decision not to click. Well, that's great, but what about the subconscious? See, we all have a fast brain and a slow brain. The fast brain is our subconscious. The slow brain is our conscious mind. We use our slow brain when we're doing difficult math or trying to solve a problem. But we use our fast brain, well, to not forget to breathe and things like that. But we also use it for defense. When something flies at my face, I don't have to think to put my hands up. I don't have to think to close my eyes. And, I'm realizing I'm not switching slides here. I should probably do that. But I don't have to think to close my eyes and block that threat. So the subconscious can help us avoid more threats than just the physical. It's literally there to adapt and to learn. And there's this behavioral science principle called identical elements theory. Has anyone ever heard of identical elements? It is a fascinating principle. Now, while you may not have heard of it, I guarantee you have personally experienced identical elements before in your life. And the classic example is you go out and you buy a new car. And that new car, you think you're one of the only people in town with that car when you sign the dotted line. Then you drive it off the lot, and what happens? Yeah, you see them everywhere. Why do you see them everywhere all of a sudden? Is it because they weren't there before, or because you weren't conscious of them before? They weren't there. I like that. But that's identical elements in action. As you become more familiar with the concept, you start to see it everywhere. Now, how does this apply to cybersecurity? Well, I like to talk about what I call human virus definitions. So what happens when an employee goes through a phishing simulation? And then at the end of that phishing simulation, instead of a login page, there's immediate, just-in-time training helping them realize their mistake. Well, all of a sudden, if we're making sure to give them one core piece of education, watch out for authority, watch out for urgency, be careful when you see these things, and we keep it down to that, they will all of a sudden start to see it everywhere. And now all of a sudden, even though we're using phishing simulations to teach them, they are now more aware of phishing attacks and every other type of threat because these threats use the same tactics. And so this is what I call human virus definitions. How do we implant them? We implant them by running simulations. And what that means is that we have to go away from the old sort of mentality that I've seen so much in this industry where we are very punitive with our users. Has anyone ever worked for a company that had a 3 strikes and you're out policy around clicking on fish? Anyone still work for a company that has that policy? Okay, thank God. Yes, less hands. Okay, we're coming as an industry. I like to see progression. So what happens, and I like to pick on this because it's an extreme example, but in most companies, actually, let me phrase this differently. The number one question I get asked after I give a talk at a conference is, at what point should we punish users for clicking on fish? Everyone is focusing on the punishment side of things more than they're focusing on the reward side. And what we learned from Pavlov is that we get a lot further with rewards than we do with sticks. In fact, we were taught this as kids. You catch more flies with what? Yes, than with vinegar. And the same is true when we run these simulations. And so it's really important to inoculate. And I've found that there are over 32 different types of phishing attacks. And these are the big categories, right? One of those categories is social media. Well, just because you're going to click on, let's say, a Facebook fish does not mean you'll fall for an Instagram fish. And so even within these categories, there is different susceptibility amongst your users. Why do I bring this up? Because some of your employees may have to fall for a fish in all 32 categories before they become secure. Now, my record last year out of 2 million users was only 11 clicks. We have somebody on track this year to beat that. But I approach it from the concept of what we need to do with our chronic clickers is fish them more. Give them more opportunities to fall for that fish on your terms instead of on the bad guy's terms. And in doing so, create that muscle memory, create those subconscious virus definitions that help prevent it. So, has anyone ever heard this phrase before? Does anyone use this phrase frequently? Okay, so I highlight this as a perfect example of social engineering for good. There is a cognitive bias called framing bias, and what it says is that people will interpret things differently based on how it's worded. So this is a common thing we all say every day, and I use it because this is a statement in cybersecurity that has been void of any communications planning. Now, why do I say that? Because one word can make a world of difference in a statement like this. And so what happens when security is everyone's responsibility? Yeah, it's no one's responsibility. Or really, it's all of ours, the people in this room, because the rest of the staff are going to point to you and say, well, he's got it, she's got it, so I don't need to worry about it. So what we did was we changed it. Hold on. If it will change, there we are. One more. Okay. So what we did was we changed it to security is your responsibility. Now, it's only one word difference, but it makes a massive difference, doesn't it? Anyone going to take that back to their people and start changing it to security is your responsibility? See, the difference is now there's a personal connection. There's no way for them to scapegoat it or to get that group project mentality, if you will. And so this is an example of framing. Now, I think that one of the really critical things, because I'm really going to push phishing a lot, but I want to start by saying that I think that most phishing simulations that I've seen in my lifetime are very terrible experiences that do nothing to help our employees be more secure. I see people use internal information that no attacker would ever have to create this perfect phish where there's not a single red flag that everyone's going to click on. That's great, but it's a gotcha. And the goal, it shouldn't be to catch somebody failing. The goal should be to catch them doing the right thing and to praise them. So what I would rather do than say, hey, you messed up and clicked on a phish, is say, great job, you reported that phish. It's people like you that keep our company secure. You truly are a cyber hero. Now, I'm not saying that you don't want to tell them when they've made a mistake. That just-in-time immediate training is critical. And the reason it's critical is because at the moment a mistake is realized, there is a chemical reaction going on inside their brain. Quite literally, there are new mental pathways being formed because of the emotional response of realizing that mistake. When we train at the moment the mistake is realized, we are hijacking that emotional response, and we get on average 75% better retention. 75% better retention. So it's really critical that we have that immediate just-in-time training. And I'll follow that up with a warning or a recommendation, and that is don't ever exploit your users. Not unless it's part of your annual pen test, and that's a different scenario entirely. But when you're phishing as part of your awareness, it doesn't matter if they'll type in their username and password. It could have been a consent auth. There could be a 0-day. There could be a hook behind it. What matters is that you get that training through to them right then because they are uniquely susceptible to learning. Now, I brought that up because I want to talk about gamification. So how do we make our phishing experiences less negative? Well, let's start by looking at what a negative experience might look like. I saw it happen once. So this was an actual pen test. So fortunately, we may have gone a little bit too aggressive on our pretext. And basically, we just sent out a phish saying, hey, you've gotten a bonus. And it wasn't even it meant to, like, it was very ambiguous. We didn't promise any numbers or anything like that. We're trying to keep it sort of, I guess, ambiguous. Well, it backfired. What happened was this little old lady who had been expecting a raise for a long time, but was obviously too shy to go ask for it. She gets the email, she gets all excited about her bonus, starts telling her family and her friends, and then she gets an email about an hour later from her boss saying, hey, I need to talk to you, you fell for a phishing simulation. And it went from this really high, almost euphoria for her to this very negative, oh crap, I might lose my job now. And that is not the type of experience we want to be creating for our users. That is the type of experience that is the reason that so many users hate InfoSec people. You ever met users that hate us? Anyone? That's because too often we're the department of no, but I will talk about that in a minute. So how do we gamify phishing? Well, it's really simple. We tell users we're gonna phish them. We make a game out of it. We simply say, hey, let me tell you about this phish that pretends to be from your finance team. And then it says, now be on the lookout, because the next time you see it, it might be from me, or it could be the real bad guys. And now it creates this hypervigilance. And you don't do this one time, you do this continuously, where they're always being warned about a different type of phish, they're always getting a different type of phish. Not only does it get them to always be on the lookout for it because they know it's coming, and whether it's ours or the bad guys, they're less likely to fall for it. But on top of that, it takes this potentially negative situation and it makes a game out of it, and it de-weaponizes it. So now if they do fall for it, they're like, ah, you got me, versus feeling betrayed. So it's really important that we do more to gamify. And to that, we've all seen the wall of sheep and the walls of shame in our industry, because in the old days of DEF CON, we had fun with the walls of shame. But one of the things we realized is that maybe it's not so good to shame people, and maybe it's better to praise people that are doing things right. And so I will point out that there is a positive to literally any negative that you can think of. Instead of punishing, you can reward. Instead of, there's positives to literally every single negative out there. And I think one of the big ones is use leaderboards. Praise the people that are doing the best instead of calling out the people that are doing the worst. So, now let's talk about another principle, and we're back to framing, but this is talking about how so often users only ever hear about how they're part of the problem, and we don't make them part of the solution. And so I think it's really critical that when we are communicating with our users that we make sure that they know how critical they are to us being successful in securing the company and their organization and their paychecks. Let me jump forward. I keep forgetting. I have slides here so that I got them in front of me. See, that was the one you were supposed to see just now. So let's talk about some of the different tactics that are used against your employees. Urgency. That's, I think the top one that I see is urgency. The number set to one is authority. But these are some of the most common levers that you'll see used to trick your people into clicking. Now, why do I call these out? Because in a moment here, I'm going to show you how all of these same tactics can be used to help make your people more secure, not just to trick them into clicking. So phishing attacks are constantly evolving and getting smarter. If I can get this to work, there we are. They're constantly evolving and getting smarter. And so our training and our programs and approaches have to get smarter too. And so to that, I want to get a quick show of hands. How many people currently do role-based phishing simulations? I see a few hands. That's great. But I see quite a few more people that haven't raised their hands. Now, how many people see role-based phishing attacks every single day targeting their organization? It's about the same amount of hands. I expected every hand on that one. But the attackers, they're getting smarter. They are no longer sending these very generic things. They're targeting our developers specifically. They're targeting our finance team specifically. And so our approaches to mitigating these threats, they have to get smarter as well. Oh, it worked. Okay. So there is a formula for behavior change. It actually came out of Stanford's Behavioral Science Laboratory. It was developed by a guy named B.J. Fogg. Now, this formula is the reason that we are all addicted to social media. It is baked into most of the technologies that we see coming out of Silicon Valley. But what it says is that if we want to change behavior, that we need motivation times ability times prompting. And the core part here says that if you are missing any one of those three elements, you will fail. So let's look at our traditional approaches to security awareness. We do better nowadays at motivation and ability, but too often we're not doing great at prompting. So let's get a show of hands. How many people train their users at least once a year? Okay, keep your hands up if you train them at least once a quarter. Now keep your hands up if you train them at least once a month. Now keep your hands up if you train them at least once a week. No hands. So I bring this up because prompting is the part that I feel we've missed the most as an industry. Prompting says that the average person will not think about cybersecurity on their own. They are not weird like us. I think there's a Tylenol joke there, but anyway. But no, they will not think about it on their own like we will. And what that means is that they have to be prompted. What's great, though, is that our users store everything cybersecurity in the same folder in their brain. So it doesn't matter if we're talking about passwords or phishing. It brings all of those topics to the front of their mind, and it keeps security front of mind. And so this is really important. So let's jump in and go through a couple of these different elements. So the first one's motivation. How do we motivate users? Well, I think this one we've pretty much got on lock, but in case you don't know how to motivate your users, they are motivated by three things more than anything else in the world. They're motivated by their family, their finances, and their ego. If you can contribute to any one of those, you can tap into their motivation. So when I work with employees and I have them sign a user pledge that I'll show you in a little bit, I tie that pledge to their personal life, to their finances, and if I can, to their ego, because it helps to make it more effective. So the next one's ability. The best case study here was Apple with their passkeys. So before they invented, or not passkeys, I'm sorry, Touch ID. So before they released Touch ID, they had hit a 48% adoption rate for people actually enabling this on their phone, and they could not get above 48%. So what they did was they enabled Touch ID. And all of a sudden, the most secure way was the easiest way. And it jumped almost overnight to something like 86% adoption, and went up from there even more when they introduced Face ID. So the lesson here is that security, when it's the easiest option, becomes the default option. And I know at my company, we recently moved everyone over to passkeys and got rid of passwords as much as we can. And I can tell you that this is a perfect example of ability being done right, because it makes us more secure, but it's easier on our users. And that, to me, is is the holy grail in cybersecurity. So brings me to prompting. I've talked about it a little bit, but the most critical thing that I think stood out to me throughout my career was this meeting that I had with a hedge fund CEO. So we did it's this major New York City hedge fund, and we did their annual penetration test. They were one of my favorite clients because they wouldn't let me write a report. It had to be done verbally because they didn't want anything that could be subpoenaed and brought into a courtroom. And so the first year we say, hey, listen, you've got a serious security awareness issue you need to resolve. And so he implements security awareness training. The next year, they failed every single one of the human security tests. And so I go back to him, I'm like, you've got a huge human security problem. And he says, well, that's what you told me last year, and I did what you told me to do last year. I implemented security awareness training. He said, what am I supposed to do if that's not working? And I said, well, I guess you need to do more training. To which he replies, do you know how much money it costs me per hour, per employee for training? And I'm like, no, enlighten me. He says, well, $10,000. I'm like, well, I could see why you might not want to have everyone do 2 hours of training a year. And at first I'm thinking, man, this guy's an idiot. If 1 hour is not working, we probably need more. That's the logical sort of common sense, right? But what I realized was that there was some more value to that marketing degree. But what I realized was that how do we do it in advertising? How do all of these big advertisers influence us to go shop and buy their brands? Well, it's not with 1 hour long, once a year classes that educate us about their brand. It's through 10-second long, 15-second long, 30-second long commercials. And 30 seconds is the longest. And so when I founded Fish Firewall, I really brought that approach into it, and we realized that if we were breaking things down into 30-second chunks, that we could be in front of every single user in the organization once or twice a week, every single week of the year, and we are still only at about 30 minutes of the user's time. Now let that sink in. 30 minutes of their time, but we are educating them every single week of the year, keeping cybersecurity front of mind. So prompting is the most critical part that I feel we've really missed out on. Now, the next thing is, it's not about, and I said this, I won't spend too much time on it, but it is not about catching them doing the wrong thing. It's about catching them doing the right thing and praising them. I feel the most critical KPI that we have anywhere is that fish report rate. If I send 100 phishing simulations, how many of those come back to me? Because that measures my culture more so than any other metric out there. And so I encourage this, and the cheapest reward that you can give people is a simple kudos, a praise, a slap on the back. And going back to the motivation, people love to be praised. Ego is one of the most effective tools in our arsenal. So when they do something right, tell them you're a cyber hero. And I call people cyber heroes all the time because it's sort of cheesy and it gets like this weird reaction and they love it. I don't know why, but it works, I'm telling you. Users love being called cyber heroes. So let's move forward. I will point out while we're on this slide, though, that micro-training is really critical to creating those human virus definitions. While those phishing simulations are the direct trigger, it's that continuous education that gives them the tools they need to be more successful. And let's jump forward. Okay, we already had jump forward. So I think the most critical thing here is make sure you're educating at the moment the user realizes their mistake. Okay. Yeah, we can skip that one. Okay. Number one thing here before I get into a couple of the tactics and give you some more really tactical advice that you can take back to your companies, it's really critical that we are constantly expanding our phishing simulation library. So one of the things, or where we get almost all of our simulations from, are actual attacks hitting our users. We re-simulate, we de-weaponize them, we take the fangs out, and we turn it into training content. The other thing is that we don't ever send a fish without follow-up content that's customized to that fish. So it has, hey, here were a few of the red flags that could have helped you identify this. That follow-up training is as critical as that fish, and it needs to be custom to that email, because when it is, it helps it click so much more for your users. Come on, one more. No, one more. Okay, so talking about metrics. Number one biggest metric that I've already talked about is what percentage of people are reporting that fish back to you. How many people track that currently, the report rate? Good, I see quite a few hands. To me, this is the number one best indicator of culture. The higher your report rate, the better your culture. It also tells you how much you're not being told about. If I send a phishing simulation to 100 people and 50 of them report it back, that means only 50% of actual phishing attacks hitting our org are actually making their way to me. So that's the other thing. Outside of that, it's, I would say your fish click rate is, of course, very critical. Really, to get to the point where you're going to see an actual ROI, you need to get down into the sub 1%. It is possible. I have over 2 million users that are there. And now let's jump into some social engineering for good, if this will work. Oh, yeah, real quickly, AI is changing the game. And that means that our awareness programs have got to stay up. How many people do AI security training? Like just specific AI-centric security training? Got one hand, two, three, four hands. That's awesome. But for those of you that didn't raise your hand, you need to be doing it. Your users are not going to just not use the AI. They're just going to use a non-approved AI instead. And so it's really critical to be talking to users about AI and making sure that they're aware of it. And that includes things like deep fakes. They're a huge threat these days. Every single Fortune 500 CISO and CIO that I've talked to on my podcast, unfortunately I get to talk to a lot all the time, they have all seen deep fakes targeting their organization. All of them. This is no longer some threat over in Hong Kong that only hit one person. It's a very real threat that we see every day. Wait a second. Where are my slides? Ah, crap. I gave him the wrong slide deck. Okay, let's see. Okay, well, I guess I'm going to be doing this from memory. No slides here. We'll just go forward, and that doesn't matter. So, social engineering for good. A couple of the common tactics that are used against us. Number one is that authority. We see it every day. Why do gift card phishing attacks still work? It's because people have a bias toward authority. When they see an email from the CEO, they freak out. So how do we stop this one dead in its tracks? It's really simple. We make sure that every new employee gets an email from the CEO talking about cybersecurity. It really is as simple as that. If the first email they get is actually from the CEO instead of from the fake CEO, we've solved our problem there and we don't have to worry about gift cards. So that one is really simple. One of the ones, though, that really just fascinates me is commitment bias. We all have a bias that when we say we're going to do something, we put our word to it, that it means something and that we're going to follow through. Would anyone disagree? I was going to make a joke and say don't trust them. But we want to follow through. Now, where does this apply, or how does this apply to cybersecurity? Well, I love NIST. They've done a lot of great things for cybersecurity, but I'm going to pick on them a little bit because one area that I think they've done us a disjustice is around policy. They've given us these policy templates that are super complicated, super technical, and really don't, that the user doesn't understand. And so what happens is that we don't get the benefits of commitment bias when the user signs their name to the acceptable use policy or whatever other cybersecurity policy you have. So one of the things that we did, not just internally, but for all of our clients, was that we re-engineered all of our policy. It starts out with a one-sentence master security policy that becomes the pledge that everyone signs. And it says something like, and I'll probably butcher it, this is where it would help to have the slides, but it says something like, I understand that cybersecurity is key to keeping my paycheck, my company, and our clients secure. And I don't know, I'll do whatever I can to help keep it secure. And that's it. And they sign that, and then every other policy document now becomes ad hoc. And as opposed to having these really long, like acceptable use policies, what we've done is we've made every policy a bulleted list. And the rule is no more than 10 bullet points per item so that the users can easily understand it. And we've changed the policy from something that they don't understand to something that is in plain English, easy to understand. And instead of having 10 million rules, the acceptable use policy says things like, don't let your kids install video games on your work computer, for example. Well, they shouldn't be able to, but you know, we've seen these things. So it really does make a huge difference when you're able to do that. And I know there's a few other biases that I am forgetting. So if anyone is interested, and I apologize that I gave them the wrong slide deck back there, but if anyone is interested, Social Engineering for Good is an open initiative that I've been working on. It's a framework that is designed to give us what we have for every other part of cybersecurity, but we're missing when it comes to the human element. We've got leading practices or best practices for everything except humans, except for our security awareness programs. And so I came up with this. We've got CIOs from everywhere, we've got the CIO of the Dallas Mavericks that's on there, over to the CIO of the Government Accountability Office, and a bunch of Fortune 50s and CISOs as well. I mention that because it's an open initiative. It's a group project. None of us alone are going to be able to solve this problem, but I really am looking for more people to join up and help contribute to the Social Engineering for Good framework. I'm sure that many of you in here have a lot of great tips and advice that you've learned over the years that you found to work great. And that's really the idea, is sharing these best practices, sharing what we found that really works, and giving giving back to the community. All right. So that is Social Engineering for Good. I am Joshua Crumbaugh. I am on LinkedIn, Facebook, all those. Feel free to reach out. When I was first in cybersecurity, it really stood out to me that this legend in the field, Win Schwartau, just really took me under his wing and was there to help mentor me. And, you know, the whole time I'm thinking, man, I'm a complete noob, and this guy who's been in this for 30 years is actually giving me his time. And that always stood out to me, and I try to do the same. I may look mean, but that's just my resting whatever face. I'm not. I'm very friendly. Feel free to reach out. Happy to help in whatever way I can. Any questions? No? None? Yeah. One of you reminded me, one of the Social Engineering for Good tools that I forgot is reciprocity. Last year, we saw phishing attacks around Christmas time where they were sending actual physical gifts to people's houses, and there was a QR code attached to it. And the whole goal was to get people to scan that QR code. That is a very extreme example, but nevertheless an example of reciprocity. And so the way that we use this internally is you can give people rewards. So one of the things I'm doing right now with not all of my users, but about a quarter of them, is a phishing tournament. It's Security Awareness Month, and so every single Security Awareness Month, we do phishing tournaments. Well, how does it work? Well, every time you report a real phish or a real phishing simulation, you get your name entered into a contest to win whatever your company decided to give out. That's a great example of reciprocity. Report the phish, you get something in return. And all these tactics can be used both ways. Yes? So only accurate reports get you an entry. And we make that very clear in the rules that we know the difference between, reporting spam or junk or not phish, and you'll only get credit if it's an actual phish or a phishing simulation. Anyone else? Well, hey, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure to be back to Houston.